Next to speak are supposed to be two panelists together, Florence Lee and Brad Lee, but Brad came down with a bad cold, so he couldn't come. And the slide here shows Brad's Two Asian Talkback on the Facebook. And Brad sent us this email saying that he would have liked to come, and if he were here, he was going to speak about this main point, and I'm going to read just these couple of lines from his email. He said his main point is that social media should not be construed or accepted as a panacea for social justice activism. Social media is only a tool to promote communication and discussion, but it's the real face-to-face interaction that is important in bringing about social change. And he said that his colleague, Florence Lee, will properly summarize his main ideas for him in addition to her own speech. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to our next panelist, Florence Lee. Florence calls herself a neophyte social activist. As mentioned earlier, she's one of the organizers of the Youth Coalition Against Maclean's Two Asian. Through the activism work, the Youth Coalition is instrumental in bringing about enough support at Toronto Council on passing a motion against Maclean's. Without their efforts, the motion would not have passed. Florence currently works as project coordinator at the Toronto chapter of Chinese Canadian National Council. She's going to talk about the topic, Two Asian Talkback, the use of social media in advocacy. Florence, we give the floor in time to you.
Thank you so much for having me here. I call myself a neophyte activist, but I don't feel like an activist at all. I always preface these things by saying that I hate public speaking, and before this Maclean's article came out, I'd never done it before. So every time I come out here in the moments before, I'm just thinking I blame Maclean's for this. But if Maclean's hadn't come out with this article, a lot of amazing things that have happened wouldn't have happened. I sit on this panel with these really, really intelligent people, and I ask myself, what am I doing here? So I think I'm just going to speak from my own experience with working with the Youth Coalition and also working with Brad on Two Asian Talkback. He sends his regrets, and it is too bad that he can't be here because he's a really great speaker and very inspirational. He probably would have given me a really good pep talk before coming up here and inspired everyone to go out and do something after this. But I'll try and express that Bradley Lee essence to you through my little speech. So I guess I'm one of the co-organizers of the Youth Coalition Against Maclean's, but before this I hadn't really been experienced in any kind of activist work. I spent 4 years at Queen's University, and when I was thinking about why this article affected me so much, I had to do a lot of interviews with reporters, and they would ask me, how is this article affecting students at universities? And I'm not a student anymore, but as I looked back at my time at Queen's, I don't look back at it too fondly, and I never really quite understood why. And so this article really questioned that sense of belonging that I had, not only at institutions, but also in this country. And I feel like in those 4 years at Queen's, it wasn't a matter of the faces that were around me. There were white students, there were students of color, but it's that culture at Queen's or at other universities where I felt like I wasn't really made to feel like I belonged. So during my 4 years at Queen's, I probably only took one class that was sort of related to something that I really wanted to study. I majored in English literature, and the one class I took was in my last semester of my 4th year, and that was African American literature, and that was pretty awesome. And also in those 4 years, I had one professor of color. So when I think of it that way, that message that this article is sending has affected me deeply, and it wasn't until that this issue was brought up that I looked at my own experiences and saw how it affects other students as well. So how the Youth Coalition started, it was very ad hoc. This article came out on November 10th, and our first meeting was on November 17th, and it was all organized through Facebook. So my boss at the time had come back from a meeting with Maclean's, and he came back and said he was steaming mad. And then I guess that anger kind of just transferred into me, because they said three things. That if you think this article is racist, you should read it again, because clearly this is not racism. And that the people sitting around the table that had been meeting with Maclean's were too attached to that W5 incident 30 years ago, and that youth these days don't understand racism in the same way. And that the third thing was, again, that this article is not racist because the writer, Stephanie Findley, had asked her Asian friends, and they thought this article was great. So clearly there's nothing wrong with it. So when I heard this, I was really pissed off. And my partner in crime, Chase Lowe, who's the other co-organizer of the Youth Coalition, we're just kind of brainstorming, thinking we're really mad. And then all of a sudden, Andy comes into the office and he's like, "What about you, youth? What can you do?" So, I mean, you kind of have to meet Andy, but he was just like this ball of fire. And then we're like, yeah, that's exactly what we're thinking. So over the weekend, we created this Facebook event. And you know how it works. It just kind of spreads through people posting it on their page. And we had about, I guess, 100 people. We had 200 people that said they were coming, and then 100 people that actually showed up. And what happened there, everything happened very organically. We had a few speakers there as well, and then people were able to kind of air their grievances and talk about their feelings about this article. But we also wanted to empower people to show them that they could actually leave this place knowing what they could do and how they could create change. So we created three different committees, and we had the Communications Committee and the Public Education Committee and Corporate Strategies, which would kind of target Rogers, who owns Maclean's magazine. So out of the Youth Coalition, we've done several things, but because it was created on an ad hoc basis, we also learned along the way, and we also learned the hard way that it's not easy to get people to come together, but for them to come together and actually keep that momentum going, that's more difficult. So we went from that big group to, right now I think there may be 6 or 7 core people who are still going hard at this issue. So how do we work together with Two Asian Talkback? Basically, Two Asian Talkback is that Facebook page that Bradley created. Before this, he hadn't ever created a Facebook page. He had to call his cousin up in Calgary to teach him how to, post things up and put pictures up and everything. So he has a lot of experience. He's had 20 years of experience in journalism, so he knows how media works. But I think this social media thing was also new to him, and he calls it his own personal news agency. So basically whatever kind of news article, blog post that came up, he would either post up, or people who liked it or joined the group would be able to post their own things up and start this dialogue. And we're also able to disseminate information. For example, things like this event and the first teach-in at U of T, which was also pretty much organized solely through Facebook. Two Asian Talkback was able to basically be a very good communication tool to spread this news, not only around Toronto, but also across Canada. So there are a few administrators of Two Asian Talkback and some in BC. So in that way, we can also keep connected to keep informed on what is happening over on the West Coast. So I think what Brad imagined Two Asian Talkback to be was to give the community a chance to talk back. He always stresses that we're not attacking freedom of speech, which is how a lot of people have reacted to, I guess, our campaign. It's that people also have the right to talk back, just as Maclean's has the ability to put out issues like this and other articles that are Islamophobic and just xenophobic. We also have the right to have our say, and this is kind of his way of allowing people to come together, kind of build this online community and talk back. But as he also stressed, Facebook isn't really the be-all and end-all of social justice. It's really easy to just click like, which I'm really guilty of doing. And I clicked that I'll probably go to like 5 events, and I end up going to one. But I think with Two Asian Talkback, it's just sort of a stepping point, because a lot of the work that we did happened obviously offline and through face-to-face interactions. There have been so many different meetings organized online, but it's these face-to-face interactions that really inspire people to feel like they're connected with others, and that they're not alone in this fight, because you can be in your room feeling really angry, but I mean, the chances of you actually going out and feeling like you want to do something, it's harder when you feel like you have to go it alone. So one example that I guess was probably the most exciting was when we were lobbying at Toronto City Council last December, when this motion was raised by Maclean. The news of this motion was raised on Two Asian Talkback, so that was actually the highest point of the traffic hits. Before this, Two Asian Talkback, the daily average hits were about 15,000 a day, which was pretty amazing. And at the highest point, it was 24,000 hits a day, and that was right before this motion was passed. And so this information was posted on Two Asian Talkback, but through the Youth Coalition working together with different groups such as the U of T Students Union and Ryerson Students Union, we were able to lobby in different ways, so I guess in more traditional activist methods, such as phoning the city councilors. We had a phone party, which was actually kind of fun, even though it doesn't sound like much fun. We've called 44 councilors, 1 mayor, we sent countless emails. 3 members of the Youth Coalition actually went down to City Hall and had the opportunity to go door to door to talk to the city councilors. So it's that face-to-face time that I think had a lot of effect, we'd like to think, on those councilors' decisions. And we also had councilors wear buttons, and we took photos of them. So that was kind of our way of holding them accountable. So we put these photos up on Facebook to show, their support on city council and to build up that confidence of people who wanted to fight for this cause. And so the next night, I guess the night before the city council meeting, there was another Facebook event organized that tried to gather people to show up at the city council meeting. And although they didn't pass that motion until late at night, without that, students from different universities wouldn't have come together just to be at city council together. And at the end of that night, after a few very confusing phone calls, I don't really understand the language at city council, so I didn't even know if the motion was passed or not, but it was passed. And I guess without using this Two Asian Talkback website as a tool to communicate to people, to keep telling them, keep calling, you still have time, and these are the ways that you can help. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to mobilize as easily. So social media enhances that chance of us getting a voice and building that voice, but it's also like nothing beats people coming together and talking about these things, like an event like this today. So there have been a lot of things that the Youth Coalition and different groups have been planning. We have a button campaign, which you've probably seen outside. We're trying to raise money for a legal fund, and these buttons we hope to kind of disseminate through different universities, different events, so that people can spread the word about this cause. I was walking through Pearson International Airport, and security stopped me, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And someone asked me, like, what is this button? So it's these conversations that you start, and people are curious and actually willing to listen. And if they don't agree with you, they won't really say anything, because it's just in passing, and maybe they'll actually go and look up this article. We also have a petition that's going around that we want to send to Minister James Moore, because Maclean's receives $1.5 million in government funding from the Ministry of Culture and Languages, Heritage and something like that. So we have these postcards outside that Karen's holding that you can actually sign, and you can send it postage free to James Moore. And we also have actual live petitions, so we have petitions that you can pass out to your friends and send them over to the House of Commons. So we have, in addition to this, we also have other events happening, just like this one being planned at York University, and also McGill happening next week. And hopefully something will happen at Queen's University, maybe, I don't know. But when I look back at the last 2 months, I'm really exhausted, but still feeling like there's a lot to be done. And I'd like to quote Brad Lee on this, and this is how inspiring he is. He always tells me, we haven't achieved the stated goals, but we've gone so much further, we've already won. And that's, I guess that's also what keeps him going as well. The fact that this article came out 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, and people are still willing to come out on a snowy day at McMaster University to hear us speak and just to discuss this article and the implications that this article has. So I do blame Maclean's for causing me a lot of stress and a few sleepless nights, but it has been a very great experience, and I think it continues to be this thing that brings people together and keeps this dialogue going. So thanks very much.